Thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks to all of you coming, especially since I know this particular conference was supposed to be tomorrow, so I hope you're, one, in the right conference, and two, I appreciate the fact that they moved the time so I am able actually to get home for our Thanksgiving holiday in the USA. It's always lovely to be here, especially now. I think for any of us, travel is a challenge, but it's great to get out and see people once again. And again, this is not the most exciting topic in the world, risk management and cargo insurance, but incredibly important these days, and really more than ever with the global shipping crisis. So I'm going to get through. Let's see if I can get this to move. There we go. Again, the purpose of this presentation is really to have a familiarity with cargo insurance, understand what it means and what you can do in this world of global shipping crisis, some of the things you can control, and things like risk management. That's something you can actually control in your life. Just briefly on our association. As mentioned, I'm based in Portland, Maine, which is a very small town in the United States. We are actually a virtual association, but we are global, with 50% of the membership of the association outside the USA, but founded in the USA back in 1976. So quite an old shippers association. And our primary mission remains to negotiate ocean freight rates using the volume of our global members to get the best rates and conditions with the ocean carriers. We also have a huge risk management program. So that is our second pillar, running this very large insurance program tailored to the beverage alcohol business. And our third main pillar is education and advocacy and intelligence. Anyone who is a member of our association gets almost daily updates on what's going on around the world, whether it is things like the WTO Airbus cases that created tariffs in both the USA and the EU on beverage alcohol. As I think many of you who followed any type of trade, you knew what we were up against in the USA over the last years during the Trump administration, where I would say we were quite a tariff-happy country, created a lot of problems, also a lot of potential for bulk. When bottled wines were getting tariffed and bulk wine wasn't, there were a lot of shifts. So for us, watching what's going on in trade policy and on a worldwide basis is a big part of what we do, as well as, again, monitoring things like the natural disasters that are creating incredible problems in global shipping. So again, for WSSA, I'm very proud of the insurance program we run. It is 100% tailored for beverages. Many things that aren't in a normal policy are covered in our policy. Some of the items on this screen really apply more to bottled goods than bulk shipping, but for sure, things like container damage, and even covering damage in FLEXI tanks, something that, again, many of you don't think about the type of damages that can occur. So we're going to talk about some of those specifics as we go through this. Fairly simple slide here, but basically you can insure your goods on any mode of transport. And it's something, again, when you don't know much about insurance or you just assume you're covered for things, that is something that most people don't understand, where an insurance policy may stop and finish, but absolutely key to know that you can cover your cargo on any mode of transport. Again, some of the basics of marine cargo insurance. Cargo insurance basically covers physical loss or damage of goods from an external cause. It does not cover damage if it is the problem of how you packed the goods or something that you can control. It has to be an external factor. It's kind of the basics of insurance 101. So again, if you, for example, are shipping your, whether it's bulk or bottled goods, and you are not using any type of temperature protection as an insulation or a refrigerated container, and your cargo is heat damaged, that is not covered in most policies because you didn't take the proper action to protect your cargo. So even with bulk shipping, you can insulate those containers or even use reefers in some cases. So it is really important to know what you can control and what you would be covered for if there is a claim. Standard policies, again, Many of the big companies out there, and you may be one of them, you might have some type of insurance coverage in your corporate policy. You have business insurance, you have car insurance, you have homeowners insurance, many different types of insurance out there. Cargo, I would say, if it's in your corporate policy, it may not cover many, many things that are important to your risk management program when it comes to beverage alcohol. When you talk about duration of risk, incredibly important right now, everyone is having delays in shipping, whether it's sitting at an ocean port waiting to get on a vessel, whether it's in a transshipment port in Cartagena or Manzanillo or Taranga, wherever it might be. The delays are incredible, more than ever right now. And many policies have a very short duration of risk for cargo. Again, our policy has an unlimited duration. So things like this you don't think about. You don't read. I think the statistic is only 10% of people actually read their cargo insurance policy. So you rarely know what you're covered for unless you get into the details. So for sure, duration of risk being a huge one. I think in terms of control of damaged goods, this is another thing that people don't think about. In any standard insurance policy, if your goods are damaged, and it's whatever loss it is, the insurance company takes ownership of those goods. They can do whatever they want with that product. So, for example, it's a FLEXI tank, and you believe it had contamination or there's some leakage, and you're declaring a total loss. If the insurance company can take whatever leftover product there is and do whatever they want with it, sell it on the salvage market. If you're a brand owner or protecting a particular your particular company name, and that product gets out there and it actually hurts someone in the market, you don't have control of that. So again, in our policy, we really focus on things that are specific to beverage alcohol. Most people do not want to have their brand damaged by a contaminated product getting sold on the market, even if it's sold for vinegar or something other than what it was originally intended for. So again, a lot of people don't think about these things until it is too late. One of the things, too, that obviously we are all seeing with the climate change issues in the world, natural disasters. They are absolutely, going up more than we've ever seen. Even last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a ship outside of the west coast of Canada. It was hit by the bomb cyclone. I mean, we're making up new words for weather because we've never had such weather. So the bomb cyclone hits. 40 containers were jettisoned, and containers are on ships with these twist locks and cables that are holding those containers. These storms are strong enough to rip containers off vessels. And in that particular case, they lost about 40 containers overboard, and then other containers on board the vessel caught fire because there was some hazardous material in the other containers. Things like that are happening more than ever. So again, when you're not thinking about what can go wrong, most people don't think that their container is going to get ripped off the ship, with a bomb cyclone. But so that chart just kind of exemplifies the incredible growth in natural disasters. And the other thing this does for insurance, too, if you are insuring under your corporate policy and you have one such claim, maybe you lose 4 FLEXI tanks off one ship in an incident like this, your rates are going to go up. And it's something to be aware of when you're looking at, say, using someone like a WSSA who has hundreds and hundreds of shippers that are involved in our policy. It spreads your risk. I shouldn't say never, but for most years we have no increases in our insurance costs because we're spreading the risk across such a wide portfolio of customers. Doesn't mean we don't have losses. We have, with so many customers, losses every single day, but it's spread across such a wide portfolio. So again, natural disaster is absolutely a huge problem these days. The other thing I like to talk about a little bit with cargo insurance, since it's one of my favorite topics and I think it's super sexy, the fact that it's unregulated means we can do almost anything we want with our insurance policy. It is not like corporate or liability or homeowners. There are no strict governance for cargo insurance. From my perspective, it's a good thing because we can put almost whatever we want in our policy. So it gives us a lot of leeway to add provisions as long as we work closely with our underwriter and we build their understanding of the beverage alcohol market. We ask for things that we know you need in the market. Why is it a bad thing? It's a bad thing because if you are just buying, shall we say, off-the-shelf insurance, or through your corporate policy, or through, maybe your freight forwarder, you have no idea what's in that policy. It could be that there's a deductible of $50,000. It could be that it only covers if your container was stowed under deck. It could be any number of clauses that we have seen in policies. And one of the things that we do actually is, especially for people using corporate policies that have, say, an add-on for their cargo, we have say, send us a policy, we'll take a look at it, we'll analyze it, we'll get back to you about, what's missing. Is it good? Is it bad? If it's a super low price and it's got some, say some things that we would like to add in there, but you're paying such a low price, maybe it's worth it. As they say in the UK, mind the gaps. We are always looking for the gaps when we analyze a policy. So again, if you think you've never had a loss, and people can go years and years and years with never having a cargo loss. I think it's less likely these days. Certainly, the COVID situation did change the risk outlook, especially in the early months when there weren't as many people at warehouses, there weren't as many trucks on the road or cars on the road. There was a lot of theft. In the USA, I would say that the biggest incident we've had, and actually globally, has been theft over the past few years. Now, theft is not a big problem with bulk wine, but for sure it has been an issue with case goods. And a lot of it is because there are just fewer people looking. There's fewer people in warehouses, like I said. So if you haven't had a loss, again, very, very lucky. It probably will happen at some point. Some companies absolutely say, we're going to basically self-insure. We are not going to carry insurance, and all of that money that we save by not paying for insurance, we put it in the bank, say, and it's there for a rainy day. That's all well and good till you have a situation where maybe you do lose, 5 containers off a ship at once. Or when you run into what's called general average. I'm not going to talk a lot about general average, but just in brief, the incident I described earlier of the vessel that had to jettison containers or that got pulled because of the storm and then caught fire, that ship gets basically towed to a port, and it sits there while they determine if there is enough loss for the ship owner to declare general average. It's an old old maritime law where if a vessel declares general average, everybody shares in the overall losses that occurred on that vessel. And that can be a huge percentage of the value of your cargo. So again, something that people don't think about, but it is happening more and more. If cargo is not insured, this is the other question we get a lot. What happens? Most people think that someone is insuring their cargo, whether it's their freight forwarder or maybe their bag provider when it comes to FLEXI tanks. Or that the ocean carrier is responsible. Absolutely not true. All of these parties do carry some type of insurance, but it's extremely limited. And if you ever bother to read the back of a bill of lading, which again, people usually don't read the back of a bill of lading. Everything is paperless now too, so you're very unlikely to read the back of a bill of lading. But it clearly states the limits of liability for each party in transit. So again, 1, there's huge limitations on liability. 2, you must prove that you experience a loss and that particular party was negligent. Not an easy task. It takes a lot of time, money, effort to chase down whether it's your freight forwarder or ocean carrier, whoever it might be, and extremely difficult and time-consuming to collect. This just gives you a sense of the limitations. When you look at that line number 2, ocean carriers, $500 per package is their normal limit of liability. Now, if we're talking about a 40-foot container of bottled wine and there's 1,400 cases, not too bad if it's 500 times 1,400. But in a bulk shipping situation, that FLEXI bag is 1 unit. The legal limit that an ocean carrier has for that FLEXI tank is $500. Again, you may be able to negotiate a better settlement if we've had incidents where the terminal that's handling a container literally drops the container, and everybody knows it's on video. It's definitely the fault of the terminal, which is hired by the carrier. Sometimes they would settle out for a larger claim, but even on those instances, it's not easy to collect. but definite limits of liability to be aware of. Again, as we talked about a little bit, really difficult to rely on the third parties for that coverage. And even if, they like I said, if they are not responsible for these major issues like natural disasters. When I talked about those containers getting ripped off the ship in a storm, nobody is responsible on that type of event unless you have your own insurance. Natural disasters are never covered. It is always something that is exempt. Strikes, things like that. If there's a strike at the port of Le Havre and your container sits there for 2 months because nothing is loading out, that is not the problem of the ocean carrier or the terminal. If that cargo is damaged, say, by heat or by cold or by any other external force, you can be covered with your cargo insurance, but you're not going to be covered by that ocean carrier or terminal. So, getting kind of drilling down into bulk shipping, FLEXI tanks are still relatively new. ISO tanks have been around longer. FLEXI tanks, again, in the 1980s, they have grown in volume enormously. And now there's, literally a few million FLEXI tanks getting shipped, a few million containers of FLEXI tanks getting shipped each year. The one good thing I will say is that people think FLEXI tanks are quite dangerous to ship, whether it is the issue with bulging or leakage, et cetera. But the actual percentage of damage is fairly low. So that's the good thing. Now, I think as we said, the two biggest issues that plague FLEXI tank shipping, leakage and damage to container walls. Now, again, if the leakage or damage is specifically created by the bag provider and it is an issue with the bag, those bag providers are generally pretty good about mitigating those damages and taking responsibility for whether it's transloading the wine into another bag or paying you out on a claim, because if it is truly a bag problem, they all do carry quite good insurance. However, if that leakage is called, for example, your supplier filled the bag too full. They did not meet the requirements of that particular bag, and it bursts or something goes wrong. That's not the FLEXI bag's problem, FLEXI bag provider's problem. That's your problem. If the valve is not the door is closed, say, and the valve is in a bad position, and the valve ends up getting cracked or leaked, that's not their problem. That's your problem. So again, understanding whose fault, who is at fault, and what happened and why. It's very, very important, and having your own cargo coverage, insurance coverage, on top of even what the FLEXI bag provider, I would 100% recommend it. We have so many cases of issues where the bag provider, it just, they come with the surveyor, they look at the issue, they say absolutely not a problem with the bag, not our problem, your problem. So the other, damage to container walls is also significant. Bulging is a huge issue. So again, depending on whether or not the bag provider feels they are part of the problem, any damage to that container is going to be on your head, and you can buy insurance to cover that. From our perspective, that damage to the container is actually a separate line item, and you would have to specifically request it. There's the cargo damage, and then there's the container damage, two very different things. I wish more people would insure for damage to the container. I think people forget about it, and they don't think it's going to be their problem. But you could get a $15,000 bill from an ocean carrier for damage to the container. So very important to acknowledge that and understand it. I'm not going to play this video because I think it's a video anyway. Well, my partner in crime, who was supposed to be with me, ended up not coming from Canada. He was going to talk about some very specific examples that they've been dealing with on FLEXIs. This just shows you, again, issues that are occurring, whether it's leakage or bulging. I think any of you who have been shipping in bulk probably have seen these type of incidents. Code of practice. Again, very important to understand when you're working with FLEXIs, both what the FLEXI bag providers and the container providers should be doing. So absolutely, container selection, incredibly important for FLEXIs. We need grade A 20-foot containers for FLEXIs, and there are not that many of them out there. The biggest problem right now, really, it's more the lack of 20-foot containers than the lack of actual bags out there. And what is happening with the container manufacturing, too, steamship lines are not focusing on 20-foot containers. They're manufacturing 40-foot containers and refrigerated containers. I was with the Transatlantic Group for ONE, one of the large ocean carriers in the world, one of the largest in the world. They did not order any dry containers in the past year, only refrigerated containers. That's where they can make even more money on movement of cargo, so they put all of their container orders into reefers. So getting the right type of container is extremely difficult. Many countries, what needs to be done is reinforcement of those containers to make sure they are worthy of putting a FLEXI bag inside. So again, the COA, the Container Owners Association out there, has published recommendations for basically the FLEXI bag industry as to how to deal with FLEXI. So the right type of container, the testing of the bag, marking on the containers, things that actually are not required right now. If a container, a FLEXI tank container is on a vessel, it's not marked showing that it's a FLEXI tank. And that's really, I think, problematic in our industry. It has not been a rule, shall we say. So the way, like any hazardous material must be marked with a hazardous placard. That's not the same with FLEXIs. They should be marked, but they're not. So again, these practices are all very specifically outlined, but again, most of you who are just calling up your freight forwarder to ship a FLEXI bag aren't asking any of these questions. You shouldn't really have to ask these questions. Your freight forwarder or bag provider should be following these guidelines, but I think it's just important to know when it comes to just risk management and picking the right type of bag and the freight forwarder who knows what they're doing with bags. Again, I'm not going to get into some of these details. Certainly, contamination is one of the issues that comes up with cargo insurance claims. Sometimes very difficult to document as well, but there are absolutely things that you can do to mitigate your risk. Understand the type of bag you use. Does it have the aluminum barrier? Has it been, do they use aseptically steamable valves? These are a bit technical terms, but I think it's good to be aware when you're asking for, if you're working with a freight forwarder, and you are not a company that, say, only works with approved bags and just lets your forwarder pick. Ask them what bag they use. Ask them to send you the technical specifications, just so you understand, are you using a good FLEXI bag? You know, have they met some of the basic standards? So I think this is just information to help mitigate the risk. This is just a quick, again, kind of a case study in one of the situations that we have dealt with over the past couple of years. This was the incident with a dual FLEXI, meaning it was two bags that are kind of sewed together in the middle with 10,000 liters of red wine, 10,000 liters of white wine, all in one FLEXI. During the voyage, the bag starts to leak. It is reported when the container is offloaded from the vessel. There is still leaking going on. In that instance, the customer insured with us, we immediately get a surveyor on site. Absolutely, again, one of the top tips, the minute there is any indication of damage, call your insurance company and make sure that they are taking the right actions to be able to file a valid claim. So surveyors are very important in this process. The surveyor will go to the terminal, they will go to a warehouse, they will do all the inspections necessary. The bag provider may also get involved and show up at these surveys as well. We like to have both parties present, so both the bag provider and the independent surveyor can be looking at what has actually happened in this situation. So in this case, again, we were able to move the container. The container wasn't bulging. A lot of times if the container is bulging, that terminal is not going to let that container off the pier. They feel it's too dangerous, that anything could happen as it's going over the road. In this incident, there was no immediate risk for movement. We bring the container into the warehouse where it was going to be discharged, open up the back. The surveyors are there. They were able to discharge the one bag that still had, still was intact, and they did the inspection, and it was a crack in the valve. And the FLEXI provider, again, said, not our fault, and went on their merry way. The importer fortunately had the insurance through us. They got paid in full on the claim because it was an external force of damage, and you are covered. So validating a loss, again, very, very important to notify all parties. That's one of the first thing that should happen. And again, if you don't have insurance, you talk to your trucker, you talk to your freight forwarder, you talk to your ocean carrier, anyone involved. They're basic forms that basically say preliminary notice of claim. You may not know all the details yet, but you want to put everyone on notice. If it does seem like there's significant damage, absolutely you will want a surveyor there to examine the product, to find out what was the cause of the damage, and do a report. Now, again, if you don't have insurance, there's not going to be any surveyor. If you have insurance, you have the ability to get the surveyor on site. Any costs of the survey become part of the claim. So as you go through a damage incident, virtually anything that can happen as a result of that damage, and when I think about like bottled goods, case goods, if there's breakage of the bottles, and not only is the wine damaged, but the wine has dripped into other cases and it's damaged other bottles and labels and the packaging, all of that becomes part of the claim. So little things that happen along the way can all be included in a claim if you have the right insurance. Absolutely, holding that container, even if you have managed, say you've received a FLEXI and it has leaked or there's some damage, but it's, maybe you've lost 2,000 liters, everything else seems okay, you pump that out, maybe you test it to make sure there's no contamination, but you do want to hold the container and the bag if you have pumped it out and there hasn't been a surveyor to get there in time, hold that material so they can come in and examine it even after the fact if it's been pumped. So again, retaining those materials, super important, documenting everything along the way. So if you're not responsible for insuring the freight, and again, many people, if you're a supplier and you're selling Ex Works, not your problem to insure the freight. If you're a buyer and you're buying CIF, you think, not my problem to insure it. However, like I said with insurance, it is not regulated. You have no idea what that insurance might be that the other party is carrying. So either you ask the right questions. If you're a supplier and you're selling Ex Works, you ask your importer, okay, you're buying Ex Works, are you covered with insurance? If you're buying CIF, ask your supplier, what does your insurance company? In CIF terms, cost insurance freight, the insurance in legally only has to cover total loss. So, or it could have a huge deductible. Unless you ask the question, you have no idea what that insurance that I in your CIF covers. So, understand again the fact that it's unregulated and it could be anything or it could be uninsured. You sell Ex Works to a customer and the shipment shows up and the customer claims that it was contaminated or it was heat damaged, and they haven't paid you yet, say. If you buy contingency insurance, you have a chance at getting the value of that cargo back. I'll talk about that a little bit more. So again, just understand that even if someone says they're insured, if you're selling Ex Works, you definitely may want to consider contingency insurance. This is an extremely low cost. It's like backup insurance. You can buy it for just pennies on the dollar, shall we say, but it gives you that peace of mind. So you're selling Ex Works, you have no idea whether your customer actually has insurance. You buy contingency insurance for, maybe it's $50 on the load. Then if something does happen to that product and your customer does not have insurance, your insurance would kick in. So again, incredibly cheap. People don't think about it. They think they don't need it. But I highly, highly recommend it when you don't have a clear picture of what the other party's insurance might cover. Okay, just a few more tips on from the risk management. Absolutely, inspections, the pictures, the preliminary notice. We can't stress this enough. Just making sure you document whatever you can document when there is damage on a container or a FLEXI. Photos. Everybody has a cell phone now. Everybody takes photos. We always recommend that if you are the importer, make sure your supplier is taking photos upon loading of the, whether it's the valve, whether it's the bulkhead. Try to get as much documentation on any shipment you can from start to finish. That will help you on any claim. There's a lot of other little things you can do. When you think about, different types of damage that can occur, whether it's in bulk or case goods, whether it's temperature recorders, whether it's using some of the devices that are available right now for tracking containers. Many ocean shipping companies do have new technologies that are just added onto the container, such as Traxin that Mediterranean Shipping offers, that you can actually see the events that occur in your container movement all the way from start to finish. So for example, if a container door is opened, it will register in the Traxin device and you would get an email alert. So think about the different technologies that are out there, much more available than in the past. So talk to your freight forwarder about those things or your bag provider. We find, especially now with the theft situation, we're using a lot more of those tracking devices, and whether they're actually built into the container or internal, where we are using other types of tracking devices that use cell phone technology to, again, record absolutely the movements of the container along the way, and whenever within a cell phone signal, you can see exactly where your container is. I can't believe that every single container doesn't have some type of RFID or tracking, that we're still behind, I would say, in the industry, but it's getting there, and there are items that you can purchase quite easily and inexpensively to do that type of tracking. So I think that's another thing with risk management that is becoming more and more important, is the use of technology. So that is all I have on risk management, and I went through it quite quickly, but if anyone has any questions, happy to address or talk after. And if anyone, again, no, we're good? We're good.
Questions?
Huh? Oh, here, is this, oh, okay.
Hello. Hi, my name is Sharon Nagel. I'm a journalist with the French wine media. And we're hearing lots of stories about logistics issues, particularly in the United States. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how from your perspective? And also, are the issues the same on the west coast of America as they are on the east coast of America?
Sure. I really didn't want to talk about this today because I'm sick of it, but no, I'm happy to. So obviously, the entire global supply chain crisis is really because of the United States. When you think about the global demand for goods, there is not a significant increase except in the United States. And this incredible curve that had been going on in the United States for the last, really since 1960, where the American consumer was buying services instead of goods. And the graph was literally a V graph with services and goods. Pandemic hit, and that graph completely plummeted on both sides, much more so than in almost any other country. This has, led to the congestion that we are experiencing today. So the West Coast is still actually worse than the East Coast. Los Angeles, Long Beach, the biggest port in the United States, is absolutely congested, and not because there isn't, there's plenty of vessel space. There are enough containers, but they cannot move those containers off the terminals fast enough. So the problem really is that there's no space at the terminals. The vessels are waiting outside for the containers to be moved off the terminal. In the USA, there is actually a White House task force. President Biden is personally involved in supply chain, which, is kind of mind-blowing. Nobody has cared about supply chain. He has mandated for the ports of LA and Long Beach to be open virtually 24/7 to try to get more containers moved off the pier. As of November 1st, there was actually the implementation of a new fee based on dwell time of the containers at $100 that would accumulate $100 every day, $100 first day, $200 the second day, $300 the third day. For containers left on terminal more than a certain period of time, they have actually postponed that fee. There was, because this did motivate some of the big players to get their containers off the pier. So people like Home Depot and Amazon and Target, the big retailers in the United States, have been pre-ordering more than they ever have too. So we've got things like gas grills and patio furniture sitting in containers at the piers that they don't need immediately, and they have no space in their warehouse. They have been letting them sit at the piers rather than, say, rent another warehouse or find additional truck drivers. So I think those instances, those items that for the West Coast have accelerated some of the movement. But we are at least, even if things really start clearing out, we're at least 6 months away from anything being normalized on West Coast. The Port of Seattle, another huge problem. All of the transatlantic vessels, most of the Oceania vessels, are just not calling Seattle anymore. It's too disruptive of their schedules. So for example, right now, you cannot ship something from Europe to Seattle. It's virtually impossible. You may be able to ship it via Mexico, and then, with a 70-day transit time, eventually it will get to Seattle. So Seattle has almost been cut. Vancouver, also extremely congested, but still a better option if you have to get something to the Pacific Northwest. On the East Coast, the biggest port is New York, New Jersey ports. Not too bad. Honestly, very few vessels docked off-site. The movement of cargo has actually moved better than many other ports, so we do not have big problems in New York. Savannah, extreme problems. So similar to Seattle, vessels are now omitting the call of Savannah because, again, the schedule disruption is too much. They lose 7 days, 12 days sitting outside. Savannah is a port where they could handle almost any type of volume coming in on the ships, and but the problem right now is space on the terminal. So I was at Savannah, a couple weeks ago. Trucks are moving in and out of Savannah Port the turn time is under 40 minutes to get a container in and out of Savannah Port. Very, very fast. They just don't have room for more containers on the port. So what we say, the problem is in the seams. It's not the number of vessels. It's not the number of containers. It's the traffic jam of getting containers off the terminals, getting containers into warehouses and unloaded, getting enough chassis because the containers that are getting pulled off the terminals are sitting on chassis, waiting for space in a warehouse or for labor to unload them. So we are a long way out from a smooth situation in the USA. For other smaller trade lanes, all the big vessels are diverted into the Trans-Pacific trade because that's where the money is. A steamship line can make $20,000 on a container from Asia to the USA right now. And so some of these smaller trades, like the African trades and whatnot, vessels are getting pulled out of those trades to jump into the Transpac. So the trickle down has been incredible, but it's all driven by North America. So bottom line, we have to stop buying stuff in the USA. So we need the pandemic to be over. We need people to return to their former habits of buying services instead of goods. That is the fastest way to decelerate the congestion problem. But that is not happening anytime in the near future. I probably gave you too much information, but okay. We're late, right? Are we done? Okay, I'm sorry. I went over time probably. Okay. Thank you so much.